Good afternoon, everybody, and sorry about the small delay. We had some technical glitches here, but everything is fixed. So next company to present is BioPorto, and with me today I have the CEO, Tony Parra, and the CFO, Neil Goldman. So please, guys, carry on.
Thank you, Klaus, and thank you for hosting us today. Before I move forward, please note the obligatory forward-looking statements on the slide. My name is Tony Parra. I am the CEO of BioPorto. I'm also joined today by our CFO, Neil Goldman. I would like to introduce you to BioPorto commercial diagnostics company focused on acute kidney injury. Our flagship test is a reagent-only product run on common laboratory instruments found in hospitals or reference laboratories. Used alongside other standard clinical evaluation measures, our NGAL test can be used to access acute kidney injury, or AKI, in critically ill patients in as quickly as 2 hours, which is why our product is considered a stat test due to how fast the results are delivered. We currently trade on the NASDAQ Copenhagen Exchange with aspirations for US listing. In talking about acute kidney injury, the NGAL test saves kidneys and lives and is the first meaningful AKI test to come to the market. NGAL is a biomarker that closely correlates to AKI and is found in a patient's urine or plasma. The biomarker quickly becomes elevated when the kidney is injured, which can happen from it being deprived of oxygen, such as often happens during surgery, or from medication or therapy that is toxic to the kidney. Today, Neil and I are going to share how BioPorto, with a leadership team and board that have a long track records of both hitting milestones and successfully bringing diagnostics to the market, serves a $3 billion TAM, has a stat test under active review by the FDA for marketing authorization as a breakthrough device, and is driving EU commercialization and preparing for a US launch. Before I move on, let me tell you about why I am passionate about BioPorto. I lost my dad while he was a patient in the ICU. When he was 69, he developed pneumonia, but he was a strong individual, and it was definitely something the doctors thought he could get through. There was a point where he had to be put on a mechanical ventilator to get his oxygen saturation up. Before he was put on a ventilator, everyone, including myself, assured him it would only be temporary. 5 days later, we had to pull the plug on him, and he passed. He died from complications associated with being put on that mechanical ventilator. It absolutely could have been acute kidney injury. We don't know because we did not perform an autopsy. I am sure some of you have had similar stories where someone checks into a hospital for one thing but dies of another. It is just not supposed to be that way. As I said, AKI occurs when you lose blood flow or good perfusion of the kidney, even temporarily, or the kidney is directly damaged by nephrotoxic drugs or contrast agents. When the injury occurs, you start to lose kidney function. AKI happens early in the disease progression life cycle and is currently difficult to diagnose, as typically there are no symptoms to AKI. But if you can detect its onset early enough, you can save the kidney. Current diagnostics are not adequate because AKI isn't identified until it can be too late in the progression of losing the kidney function. As such, clinicians operate in the dark for the first couple of days in the ICU, and based on their training and experience, they will either choose to wait to make any kind of therapy changes or perform prophylactic early intervention measures such as dialysis, which takes time, people, dialysis instruments, and money. When AKI is detected too late, it does not resolve on its own, the kidney can progress through stages of AKI, acute kidney disease, and chronic kidney disease, likely leading to a lifetime of dialysis or even death. The marketplace for kidney-focused intervention is active and growing. Most of this work is focused on late-stage kidney failure due to the lack of tools to identify acute disease state. The market share for dialysis will grow, but this is an area where new players like Outset will shift the percentage of the market. There are artificial intelligence players embedding biomarkers into their interventional tools. either as part of an algorithm or to determine when to start or stop intervention. NGAL will play in this space, helping create market in the middle of the chart. The key is the far left of the chart, the acute onset. It is a new market area where biomarkers will create opportunities. NGAL will dominate this due to the ease of operational use and clinical utility, which will allow behavior and therapy changes early when the trajectory of patient care, cost, and impact of personal life can positively be affected. As you can see from the timeline, we've made some great strides already, and we continue to deploy the de-risked commercial plans that are outlined on this roadmap. We have already delivered on quite a few milestones and market commitments in the last 2 years. With FDA market authorization in our sites, we are approaching yet another inflection point. This authorization will allow us to launch commercially in the US with an eager clinician base. In the meantime, we are advancing our NGAL test expansion plans in Europe. Putting BioPorto's strategic priorities into focus, we recently implemented a restructuring, including a workforce reduction to optimize our operations in the transition from R&D to commercial expansion in Europe in preparation for US launch. The restructuring aligns our resources with our 3 strategic priorities, which include gaining regulatory approval for the NGAL test in the US, expanding commercial sales for the NGAL in ICUs across the country, growing revenues in Europe and other markets that accept the European CE mark, and finally expanding the total addressable market size for the NGAL test. I've already mentioned our management team and board experience. We also have an active clinician on our staff, Dr. Devarajan, who shares his time between BioPorto and has headed nephrology and hypertension at Cincinnati's Children's Hospital. As a co-inventor of the use of NGAL for diagnosing AKI, he is one of the most respected leaders in the field of pediatric nephrology. As you can see, we have also added a number of new US board members that have deep experience in leading life science companies. Some of you may even know John McDonough or Don Hardison, who are very well known in our space for leading and raising capital for companies just our size with successful exits. Additionally, Nympha Saunders, who led one of the largest health systems in the US, is on the board of Blue Cross Blue Shield of New Jersey, brings a unique combination of healthcare provider and payer perspective to our commercial objectives. Acute kidney injury is prevalent, affecting 1 in 4 children and 1 in 5 adults who are hospitalized. Patients in hospital settings are at the most risk of AKI, including cardiac surgery patients, patients requiring mechanical ventilation, organ or bone marrow transplant candidates, in addition to multiple other use cases in the clinical setting where monitoring NGAL values is critical in informing the clinician as how to plan for a course of their patient's care journey. AKI is also an incredible burden on the healthcare system. It is detected in a shocking 12% of critically ill patients with an annual cost of $5 to $20 billion, with 21% of those patients unfortunately succumbing to it. It is now clear that AKI is a far more significant problem than most realize. From detection and treatment, ultimately prevention, the crucial question now is, why is progressive AKI so prevalent, leading to disastrous consequences, and how can we detect and prevent this progression earlier? Clinicians know their current standard of care doesn't work, and late diagnosis of AKI results in preventable permanent damage. That's because the current standard of care, serum creatinine, misses 43% of patients, and it is 2 to 3 days delayed. And further illustrating the significant unmet medical need, 66% of AKI cases are misclassified, and 70% of clinicians believe they are missing AKI. That's not surprising because serum creatinine results are affected by many variables, including age, muscle mass, and gender. Feedback at the clinician level in care settings has been overwhelmingly positive. and we are hopeful that the NGAL test will transform or supplant current standard of care. Ultimately, our diagnostic can be used as an intervention tool to measure kidney function and, on an ongoing basis, determine the best treatment path forward when evaluating patients for AKI across the continuum of care. I would like to present a case study where the use of BioPorto's NGAL test affected a very positive outcome for a patient. This was a 22-year-old female who had Vactal syndrome, a congenital disease that in this case included a dysfunctional urinary system. As a result, her right kidney failed and required a transplant. Fortunately, they were able to find a replacement and perform the surgery. This nephrologist was very aware of the benefits of NGAL measurement and ordered daily testing in conjunction with the current standard of care, serum creatinine. As you can see, as depicted by the blue line, the patient had a very high NGAL value right after the transplant, which is not surprising, as her doctors tracked both measurements in the following days. The NGAL level dropped quickly and significantly, indicating that the kidney was in good shape and had a high likelihood of waking up to perform its normal function. The kidney just needed time to recover. So wait and see was the correct treatment path. If her doctors had only followed the trend of serum creatinine, there was an indication of a worsening state until day 9. Normally, a clinician might initiate dialysis. Dialysis, while life-saving, is very invasive and risky, especially in pediatrics where arterial access is very difficult. This is especially in the case of a transplant patient, who are typically immunosuppressed to minimize chance of rejection. Installing catheters for dialysis always provides a risk for infection and can be deadly for a transplant patient. But because of improving NGAL values, the clinician made the right decision not to perform dialysis, and this patient recovered nicely and is now attending college. As a reminder, our NGAL test is run on common standard chemistry analyzers such as the Abbott Alinity or the Roche Cobas shown here in the picture. Our assay is a reagent-only product, so no medical device is needed. With the core assay, we also sell control and calibrator kits, which enable the attainment of very high margins. Assay-only products also makes our regulatory pathway typically shorter. Many of us have experienced visits at hospitals with loved ones who had blood or urine samples sent to an in-hospital laboratory. These are the laboratories that can run NGAL tests on standard instruments. Therefore, hospitals do not require capital investment to implement an NGAL program. All the while, as we continue to advance toward U.S. commercial authorization, we are growing and expanding our European presence. We are supporting this push and have added key executives to our commercial efforts internationally. Combined with the company's global marketing organization, BioPorto's executive team will focus on assisting our sales channels in driving market adoption in select European markets. This will include extensive market education on AKI and the value of testing for NGAL while strengthening our distribution network. In the US, the research use only or RUO version of the NGAL test is actively being used by more than 30 hospitals. This is why I came to BioPorto. Although they are a minority, this is a solid early indicator of adoption possibilities in the US. What this tells me is that there is minimal clinical risk. Otherwise, they would not buy this test. I've never seen this degree of adoption prior to FDA authorization. Our FDA submission was built on a strong body of clinical trial evidence demonstrating the power of NGAL tests to detect AKI in at-risk pediatric patients. As a reminder, when I say pediatric patients, these are patients who are 3 months of age up to 21. Data from our guidance clinical trial clearly demonstrates that the NGAL test provides highly specific near real-time detection of AKI that can be integrated with clinical acumen in order to attend to those patients truly at risk for the devastating consequences of AKI. There is a significant unmet need to address this issue in children, which is why we were able to get the FDA's breakthrough status. It is also the reason why we have established pediatrics as our beachhead, as it has the potential to drive adoption more rapidly. As an update to our FDA status, after a 3-part clinical study, we submitted our de novo application in November of last year. We are also actively working on additional initiatives to expand the market for the NGAL test in the U.S. beyond its indication. The first element of the strategy is instrument expansion.
Tony and Neil, I'm sorry to interrupt you, but we have some limitations, on the timeline. So is it okay if we took a couple of questions just to finish?
Absolutely.
Yeah,
absolutely.
Because both gentlemen have been presenting on HCA before, so some of the slides you will find on HCA. Thanks a lot, Tony and Neil, for that. So one question coming up here is the ongoing dialogue with FDA. I think you mentioned it, Tony, but it's very important to emphasize you don't have to apply further, or you will not receive any further letters, and you will not apply to a new letter. You are in ongoing dialogue. Could you update us a little on that, Tony?
Sure. If you remember, we submitted answers to our last letter, the additional information letter, at the end of June. We have been in active dialogue with the FDA. We have held a number of conference calls with the FDA regarding specifics around the clinical value of the test, how it will realistically be applied in the clinical setting, and then how will we describe this in our indications for use and in labeling. These are active discussions. There is nothing to indicate that more data is required. There's nothing to indicate that the FDA is on the verge of approval or disapproval. So I think it's going very, very well from that perspective.
Thanks a lot, Tony. And a quick question for you, Neil, before we end the presentation. You showed a very good uptake of NGAL in Europe. It's already CE approved here. Could you very briefly elaborate the investor community? Are we still seeing some good traction there?
Yes, we are making progress in Europe, Klaus, and thanks for the question. Just to be clear, this is, and as we've talked about, this requires a building of a distribution base throughout Europe. So it's not going to be something that happens overnight, but we're absolutely seeing steady progress with the benefit of key opinion leaders and others who we've already established across Europe. And we'll look forward to further progress there.
Thanks a lot, both Neil and Tony, for taking us through your presentation. Again, I'm sorry about the small technical glitches and that we have to cut up the presentation now, but I'm very sure that we will see BioPorto online on HCA again soon, hopefully. And with that said, thanks a lot, Neil. Thanks a lot, Tony, and enjoy your day.
Thank you, Klaus, and thank you for listening. Yeah.